welcome to Data Wars.
Welcome everybody for the Data Wars podcast number 2. You heard our introduction call, and this is our first podcast. And I'm super excited to have a great guest here today. Ash, are you excited as much as I am?
I'm super excited to have our first guest. It's our first official episode, and I wanted to welcome Kranthi Kalagara from Data Links to the podcast, and we will be having a good conversation about data products. Kranthi, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Honored to be your first guest and looking to make it useful for you and your subscribers. Thank you.
Great to have you here, man. I just got introduced to you, so I'm looking forward to our conversation. Maybe we'll start a little bit with your introduction. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background, especially in the context of data products, what you've done?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, all of us have been in the data world, so I would suspect that all of us cross paths at some point. But a little bit about myself is I've been in the data management industry for almost 2 decades now. As part of that stint, I've been part of 3 startups, with all of them had successful exits. One notable one was a data management company that got acquired by IBM. The other one was a boutique data consulting company that got acquired by Accenture. This is where I really expanded my horizons from master data to big data to AI, and started getting closer to talking to clients, really understanding their pain point, not from a specific service standpoint, but an end-to-end platform standpoint. While I was working at these companies, I also supported large-scale data management platforms for the likes of FedEx, Intercontinental Hotels Group, Anthem, John Hancock, Walmart, to name a few. My last 9 to 5 stint was with a global pharma company, where I picked up my hands-on experience with data products specifically, which today's topic is about. Currently, I own and run a data product services company called Data Links that Ash referred to. So this is a little bit about my background and where I am.
Thanks, Kranthi. That was a really nice background summary. I know you do a lot more things, but thank you for that. I wanted to ask you, especially when you work with clients day to day, how do you define a data product for our guests, and how do you differentiate a data product from other data services in the market?
Yeah, so before we even think about what a data product is, I think we need to really think about the why behind the data products and why data products now kind of a question. And one thing I just wanted to kind of shed light for you and your subscribers is data products are not a magic pill solution, right? They are an evolution or an extension to the data maturity journey that organizations have already been on. But we're also seeing an opportunity for us to converge all of these, and I'll highlight some examples here. If you think about governance, right, there's been evolution from centralized to federated governance models, as you are aware of. On the technology side, we are seeing evolution into modern data platforms, going from data lakes to data mesh architectures. Now, all of this is for nothing if we actually don't leverage those evolutions to deliver something of value to the business. It is an acknowledged challenge that, in spite of all of these evolutions, the business is still not able to move fast to get quality insights from data at the pace of business. Not that it's not happening fast, it's not happening at the pace of business. So I think that's where data products really come into play. There are multiple technical definitions of data products out there that you can easily Google. I don't need to tell you this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain the definition of a data product in a simplistic way, right? So forget the word data for a second, think about product, right? What does a product mean to you? Okay. So in that context, let's take a car in a showroom and you are the consumer who wants to buy it. When you see the car on the showroom, right? It's not individual components or parts, right? They're packaging it all and making it available to you as one unit. That's a car, that's a product. So you can say that those each of the components or inbuilt or external, some of them could be external in nature, they're all features of that product. Okay, so it's easy to say that if you apply the concept of features, the product and features to data, that's what a data
Mhm.
product is. Then you take the concept of when you buy a car and you're willing to pay some money to buy that car, you're not going to take the car home and fix all of it together. You're not going to put the parts together. It is consumption ready. So apply the same
Mhm.
concept to data product. When I get a data product as a consumer of the data, I don't want to get the data in an Excel sheet, do 10 different things to massage it, the last mile massaging, and then consume it to produce value. It should be consumption ready based upon my needs and my requirements. So that is consumption ready. So that's a characteristics of a data product. It, then there's a lot of talk about value. What does value really mean, right? It is the willingness to pay by the consumer. What am I willing to pay for that car? That is value. So in our data world, the business has to determine what that value is for them. What decisions are going to they go use? Are they going to drive by using this data, and what is their willingness to pay for it? Okay, that's the value part of it. Now, all of these really
Hmm.
happen when there is quality in the car, right? So uh, if there's someone who's producing this car, like Toyota, for example, right? I'm based out of Dallas, and Toyota is, obviously is a big story in the quality philosophy that they have. They tell you how they build quality into their products and how they live and breathe quality, right? That's important because it starts building trust in the consumer, that is me. And that goes into the value. How much am I willing to pay for this quality? So that's another characteristic of a data product, is it has to have quality, right? But that loop of building trust or starting to build trust really doesn't end without a feedback loop. What is the feedback loop for me as a consumer who's going to buy the car, right? It is about understanding how other consumers are consuming that same or buying similar cars, and they're saying, yes, we really love this car for this reason, right? You kind of test it over a period of time, and that trust feedback loop is also important. So in a way, what I'm saying is a data product is packaged features of a data that's consumption ready, that has value for which I'm willing to pay. I know it has quality, and therefore I can trust it. Okay, so those are the
Hmm.
four characteristics I would say defines a data product. But how do I even acquire this data product, right? Like, for example, if you go into the dealership today, you see the car and you actually buy the car. But imagine the many intermediaries that are there in play to actually get the car to the dealership before you can buy it. There are too many touch points there, right? For example, there are some necessary touch points to produce the car itself. The manufacturer has to go get the suppliers parts and put it all together. So those are necessary touch points. But once the car is made, there are intermediaries like wholesalers, dealers in the middle that actually add a lot of how do I say it slows down my consumption, right? If it were a direct consumption model, for example, like Tesla has really pioneered in that space where they kind of disrupted the dealer model. You can make the car available online. You don't have to go to a dealership, and you go and buy it. So if you kind of enable that, that is coming to life in data products in the concept of marketplace. So that reduces friction. So a combination of these
Hmm.
things is what makes a data product a data product. So I just wanted to kind of,
Hmm.
hopefully that example made sense for you all.
That's amazing insights. I think it's important. New technologies on one side, but the business value is the critical part of it, and that's
Mhm.
how the adoption happens. I'm curious. Can you share some specific benefits that you've seen companies realize as they adopt the data product concept?
Sure. So first of all, right, data products can deliver value. By the way, you can create data products in complete isolation, but that's really not the idea of data products. We could just call it data like it's being called today, right? So data products can only deliver value when they provide quality insights aligned with high priority business decisions. So instead of doing
Hmm.
a ground up approach to building data products, I think it start with the business saying what decisions are you trying to make for your business, and therefore walk backwards to say what analytical outcomes are needed for that. Oh, by the way, for those analytical outcomes, what's the data that you need, and what's the quality of the data you need to make those decisions, right? So that is typically
Hmm.
how you do alignment of business value. And when done right, data products can accelerate business outcomes by speeding up insights, improving the quality of these insights, and reducing operational costs. What I will say is that any business out there today that's trying to make an impact for themselves and their customers do not exist without data, right? Data is everywhere. We all know this. We don't need to say this. So I would say that the criticality of data is very well established. But I would also say
Hmm.
that companies have had, or enterprises have had, a hard time amassing this data. And like I said before, um, getting quality insights out of it at a pace the business wants. Most typically, what we see happening is, um, you know, they start like manufacturing this data, and by the time the data is actually put into the hands of the consumers, either the requirement has changed, the business decision need has passed, or the data has completely changed, right? So that where
Hmm.
I'm seeing value is aligning the business value, producing data products with a razor focus on delivering driving or giving data to drive those business decisions that ultimately drive value. So I would say, to sum it all up, speed, scale, quality, and cost are the enablers at a data level that unlock business value.
Hmm. I love that. I love
That-
that answer. So just tailing off of that same thought process, if you will. So
mhm,
obviously there's plenty goes into making a decision in an executive decision making process in the companies,
mhm,
right? We have
mhm,
seen plenty of data plays into it, quality data plays into it. So I'm
mhm.
curious from a data product standpoint, how do data products really enhance that decision making process, as you have seen from your experience?
Yeah, let me give a specific example that I am focused on right now in the
I love
pharma
that.
industry.
Specific
Okay.
examples are always great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'll give you that specific. For example, a business can make a decision that we want to accelerate the number of our asset pipeline or drug asset pipeline. Okay, we want to put more assets into a pipeline so that we know that we can mitigate against the business risk. That's a business decision to make. Now the business strategy of it could be multi-pronged, right? They could say, hey, we're going to go and acquire a company that does therapeutics in this space. That way I increase my business asset pipeline. That's one way to handle it. It's a good, very good business decision. But let us say that they also say that alone is not enough, because that I have to spend a lot of capital on it. I want to be able to see if I can accelerate the value chain, look at all my use cases in the value chain to see if I can produce more, put more drug assets into my pipeline faster than I did last year, right? If that is the strategy, that's where data can play a role, right? We all know that. Now, what you need to do is, for example, I'll take one use case. There are thousands of use cases in the pharma value chain, all of which need to be addressed for you to kind of really drive business impact at a higher level. But let's take one business use case. Is they identify a problem, which is, hey,
Mhm.
applying for FDA drug applications takes 3 to 6 months today. Why? Because I have to collate all
Mhm.
this data, I have to find all this data. There are too many touch points. I have to go internally, I have to go externally, get all of this data, put it all together, and by the time I produce the FDA application, it takes me 3 to 6 months, right? So that in
Yeah.
itself is slowing the entire company down, right? But what if there's a data product that can actually cut down that FDA application process significantly and bring it down to weeks and months, where the decision maker then can slap on an LLM or however you want to solve that problem on top of this data product, and the data product has all the information that you need. That way, all they're doing is actually asking the LLM model to actually produce the FDA application that they need, and you cut down that entire decision making, cut down the time to market for medicine by, let us say, a third, right? And now that is a great example of how data products can support advanced analytics to drive business value.
Mhm. I'll ask you a last question here before I hand over to Ash.
Sure.
Then,
Hmm.
so that I think kind of maps into what I call a competitive advantage, right? I think
Yes,
if you
yes.
look
Hmm.
at the FDA example you talked about, where
Hmm.
they can go from a months of decision making process it used to take to just
Hmm.
maybe weeks, in some cases, maybe even lesser.
Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
do you think that's a good example of a competitive edge that business in various industries and it can take? Like, is it a majoritarily a time to value, faster decision making kind of an advantage, or
Uh,
are there more to it?
No, it is definitely one of them, right? Right. So, like I said, speed, scale, quality, and cost, all of them matter to drive efficiency, quality, and trust at the business level. Okay. So, for
Mhm.
example, let us say that you are doing data products, you're organizing data products the right way, and building data products with purpose. Okay. That's the key word, right? With purpose that are driving decisions. Now, the data product ecosystem frameworks will allow you to do a lot of reuse without recreating the same data assets that were created in the past. Okay, so as a result, there's a lot of cost avoidance there. That's another example, right? There's a cost avoidance. What that means is that translates to the bottom line impact to the business, where the business has to spend, less money than before to kind of reap the same benefits from the data. And I am actually
Mm.
seeing this live happen, where the data product ecosystem, when utilized properly and implemented properly, I'm actually seeing, even in the first 1 year, domains saying that they're seeing 20 to 30% reuse increase, and therefore if they put a dollar cost to that cost avoidance, that's a bottom line impact. They're saying we don't have to go and ask the business for those already. So
Mm,
so you got
mm,
to take each of this, different use cases in different things. Some impact the top line, some impact the bottom line. But the main key thing is, why is it a competitive advantage, right? Why is it a competitive
mhm,
advantage? Because your competition is doing things the way they've been doing before. You are trying to do things differently so that you can get that competitive advantage. You can give that competitive advantage to your business.
mhm. Excellent. No, this is a great answer. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Kranti, wow, there's so much I'm learning here. Like how beautifully linked the business value to the competitive advantage. I really like that. And it gets me really curious now. If I am a business
Hmm.
and I want to get into data products, I'm clearly seeing the value, and the better I implement this, the more competitive advantage I'll have. How do I get started? Like, what step as an organization should I take first if I'm looking to implement data products?
I would say that, I mean, as a business, as you mean as an enterprise, not necessarily business versus.
Correct.
Okay, okay, okay. The first thing, Ash, for me is, you won't get to this on day one, but the key thing that has to be front and center in the mind is accountability. Okay, I don't use that word loosely. It's very, very heavy loaded word, because I would say differentiate between accountability and responsibility also, right? Accountability accountability really says who is benefiting from the business decisions using this data. So that assigning the accountability has to be the first major step in terms of kind of really starting on this journey. Without accountability, the organization cannot move forward. In other words, what I'm saying is the outcome should be owned by the business function using the data or the
Mm,
insights for decision making. That's really the first step. There could be
okay.
many other steps, but that's the one that I would say is key.
So defining our stakeholders and sponsors would be the first step in understanding why the organization needs a data product. So as an organization, I have a very motivated sponsor. What are some of the
Mhm.
factors and best practices to consider when I'm trying to promote the benefits of the data product in the organization to kind of get more buy-in for this so I can, get started on this?
Yeah, like any other, like any other frameworks that we think about, this is not
Mm,
that different, right? So I would ask a bunch of questions, right? How do I assign accountability? I talked about accountability, but how do I go about assigning accountability? Okay, what does the
yeah.
process for that look like? Okay. Now I'm moving from an existing world where I know that I have developed a lot of products, or assets in the data lake.
Mm,
So how are data products any different? How do I differentiate between data assets and data products? Am I causing more confusion? What does
mm,
the principle for that look like? Okay. Then
mm,
you will also say, I'm already doing agile mechanisms today. What is the data product lifecycle? How is it different?
mm.
Okay. So it is different from an agile mechanism in the sense that we are saying integrate tightly with the data consumers. So
Okay.
there's a data product life cycle for that. Then once you produce the data product, you publish the data product in a marketplace to reduce
Mm,
friction for consumption, right? Now there's
mm.
a marketplace life cycle for that, right? What does that framework look like?
Right.
Um, then how do I align? We talked about aligning data products with business value. What does that process
Yeah.
look like? Okay. You talked about reuse. How do you classify and promote reuse within the organization, not only for that business function, but across business functions within
Right.
an enterprise? Because until you realize that value of interconnected data products across business functions, you truly
Yeah.
can drive enough value at an enterprise level. So, and there's operating models that are needed for data product development, marketplace lifecycle management, KPIs, and so on and so forth. So while establishing all these foundational frameworks is important, what one of the key things that a lot of organizations miss is really translating that framework into real implementation or adoption by actually
Right.
producing. Some organizations are mature enough. I have a client that I worked with last year. We delivered the frameworks, and that client took those frameworks, developed playbooks, and started the adoption process. So what I'm saying is, so that part is like, how do you the implementation of that particular framework is vital next step in terms of once you get the journey started, how do you move about it?
So, Kranti, your company has created proprietary frameworks in this space as well to enable
Yes,
organizations. Okay.
Yeah, again, it's not a cookie cutter approach. Even for an organization, when you develop these frameworks, it's not a cookie cutter approach for every domain, because every domain has a different taxonomy and how they want to handle it, and so on and so forth. So there will be terminology differences and all, but the idea is to create a foundation. We have a foundation that can help accelerate companies, and they can build on top of it, right? That's the idea of it. But they got to personalize it for their culture and so on. Sometimes customers want us to do it, sometimes they are comfortable enough doing it.
Okay, so definitely, challenges every organization has, I think, when they're going after anything
Yeah,
new.
that doesn't change. Yeah, that
That
doesn't
is,
change.
no, that will make sense. Is there any specific skill set as an organization which I need to be looking for uh, to ensure successful implementation of data products?
So the way I want us to think about this is, I mean, the people process tech is a very well-known paradigm and framework, right, for us in this industry. But I think it's about applying the people process tech to data. Now that's the difference in how we want to handle data differently, and that's really where we are seeing the emergence of new roles. But it's not that you are recreating that entire universe or overhauling that enterprise complete role structure. Some of the emerging roles like data domain, there are some emerging roles like data domain owner for accountability, data product owner, that are becoming a lot more critical, I would say. And I know that a lot of organizations today have a product owner concept, but the idea is to be able to put the data hat on it and kind of pivot those or emphasize certain skills in that
Mm,
context. Like, for example, the difference is a product owner that does software development is different from a product owner that does data. Why? Because you need to have an inherent understanding of the data and how to work with consumers to quickly iterate and produce data that can be analyzed, and a story be told for the consumer to say, yes, that will meet my need. Right? So it's not just delivering something, because sometimes, or most of the time, until the very end, until you do advanced data products, you don't have UI for you to visualize it. Right? So in that
mm.
sense, some of the data skills will become more relevant for existing structures or agile mechanisms that are already in play.
No,
New
makes
roles,
sense. Yeah.
yeah, there are some new roles though that are emerging, especially if
Mm,
customers decide to implement marketplace, right, for surfacing these data products for easy consumption, like metadata engineering, process engineering for marketplace lifecycle and automation. We are seeing some new roles emerge in that sense to maintain that marketplace lifecycle. Another thing that is emerging is data ops engineers. I know it's been out there for about 2 years now, but really now I see this as a convergence of how all of these things will come together. This role is emerging, or we need to re-emphasize this role to support data infrastructure and troubleshooting. Right? This is to reflect the maturity of the self-service data teams within a data mesh architecture. Right? So again, if you make the connection, right, we talked about assigning accountability. How do you assign accountability at a higher level? You do that by identifying a business need, identifying the data you need, and placing that accountability within, let's say, a business function. Okay. Now, if you translate that into the physical data mesh architecture, all in the data mesh architecture, each domain or a business function really has its own space. And a lot of the organizations are evolving to a point they're dissolving or migrating the centralized teams, data teams, into domain teams. And that domain teams need to have data ops engineers so that they can take the self-service infrastructure that infrastructure teams are already provisioning and enable it, and then they troubleshoot it if they have any trouble, but they become much more self-sufficient that way. There's all the connection from all of those facets.
This is great, interesting point on the implementation of data products, Kranti.
yeah.
Great insights there from challenges to skills and considerations. So let's pivot towards some of the success stories that you have seen. Can you share any successes, case studies that come to mind when it comes to data products and how they can be implemented and transformed in the organization?
Sure, I'll definitely cite some public examples and some from my previous experiences. Not in all cases I can
Mhm.
give you exact client names, obviously, for
I
confidentiality reasons,
understand. Yeah.
right? But early adopters are definitely making significant strides, right? For example, there is a well published use case around AstraZeneca in the pharma industry, achieving a 70% reduction in time for modeling experiments by taking this some of these principles into play, right?
Mm.
Just by providing a consumption ready data product. You know what I'm saying? I GSK saved a third on their operational costs by reducing waste and enhancing decision making. What I mean by reducing waste is the, GSK has taken an approach, which is one of the companies I worked for before, saying we'll only build if there is a business need. Otherwise, we will not build. Therefore, they manage a lot of cost
I
avoidance,
love that. I
right?
absolutely love that approach.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's really how they have done it as well. And I'm using this because I worked there and I earned my chops for data products. There are still use cases for enterprise data products, but most of the time we are seeing that data products belong to a certain business function or a domain.
Hmm. Yeah. Look, I think these are great examples. I mean, my answer to that is that's why I was agreeing with you.
Yeah.
Why do something if it is not driving value, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think there's a lot to learn for companies from that.
yes.
Technology for the sake of technology is never good. It has to drive outcomes. So along those lines, can you also talk a little bit about lessons learned? You seem to be in one of the most interesting person I've spoken to in the data product space. So I'm curious, what lessons have you learned so far in all the years you've been working on this technology?
So the way I would say is one of the things I'm a very philosophical kind of a guy, so I'll talk about it in that philosophy and then bring it down. Okay, so
Sure.
and because it doesn't kind of really change doesn't happen as fast as we want it sometimes, and we know that very well, right? So you have to keep that
Mhm.
in the back of your mind, right? At the end of the day, we have a lot of traditional org structures today. Okay, and I'm not saying any of them are going to go away, but I think how we think about it has to change. If our focus is to reduce friction between data producers and data consumers, right? So we need to kind of make sure that happens. Okay, so that cannot happen without business buy-in. So I would say the key lesson is there is business buy-in is paramount. Collaborating with the business to drive adoption is vital. You can start an engage or a program from the ground up because that's where the bulk of the thinking and the brain power is. But the idea is to be able to create that bridge. The faster you can do it with the business, the better off you will be. So I will say that's the key lesson is you can start on this journey, but don't lose sight of the fact that you got to bring the business closer to this.
Yeah, I love
In
that.
other words, the consumers. I really want to dissolve the word business and IT and architecture, right? It's just producers and consumers. That's the way we want to think about the word. Rest of them are
Good
all
way to look at
guardrails,
it.
guys. Yeah, rest of them are all guardrails. Governance is guardrails. It's not going away. Architecture is guardrails. If you right, so if you think about this data product can be further distilled into data as a product. There's so many concepts in this, right? So the function of
Uh-huh.
architecture doesn't go away. It doesn't, right? From an infra standpoint to a data standpoint, they provide the guardrails for the success of data products. But the
Yep.
idea is those necessary touch points should be mostly enabled by self-service infrastructure or by federated governance with domains making their own calls, taking accountability for the decisions, but leading on the architecture to make sure that technically it is solved the right.
Yeah, I love it.
Is really insightful, Kranti. Producers and consumers. That's how we want to think about this instead of any
Yeah.
different functional areas. You've had a lot of experience in this. Do you also kind of keep up with sort of what's emerging? Because every day, there's something new happening. What are some of the emerging trends you have seen in the world of data products that you want to make our audience aware of?
Yeah, so typically when we walk in today, generally the concept of data products is being limited at operational data products, which is where I told you that it doesn't have a UI or UX. But I think where we want to see is really the concept of data products because it's the methodology and the thinking, right? It's that extent to using end user facing data products, right? That's how I think about it. Today in the traditional system, they think about this as applications or a AI application or a web analytical application. But ultimately, those are all data products and they should be built like data products in the sense that why would you build an analytical dashboard if there's no value to it, right? So that's the concept and
Yeah.
thinking. So I would say that kind of extending the umbrella of data products to AI, machine learning, real time data processing with user friendly data visualization tools so that an end user decision maker can make decisions using it, not having to rely on someone who has to produce the data and explain that, right? So I'm also seeing no code, low code analytics. And I'm seeing the emergence of what I think of as composable AI platforms leveraging data products to make that happen. So that's the trend that I'm seeing because until that last mile um, you know uh, puzzle is solved and made easy to put decision making into the hands of decision makers, I think we'll continue to see that emerge now.
Well, no, that's great. Any final piece of advice you will give organizations who are looking to maximize the value of their data products?
I would say that this is a joke I just recently was it's a journey. Okay, depending upon your organization's culture, different tactics might be needed to reach the end state. You have to always. And by the way, I also want to say it's not that currently companies are not doing it. The challenge might be just articulating it in business terms because I have seen data management
Right.
products companies dealing with the same problem. Okay, like for example, you take the Databricks. I don't want to call out Databricks, but I'm saying Databricks, Snowflake, all of these are data management products that exist out there. But until they tell the story of business impact, and those business impacts cannot be just fluff. It cannot be like,
Hmm.
oh, we know that it helped you save it. No, it has to be show a P&L impact. Right? You need to
Yeah.
be able to be that specific. So I think in many cases, maybe it's just rethinking what you're doing, applying a little bit more rigor in terms of the value alignment, the producing the data products, and reducing friction, just tweaking a little bit in terms of maturing your journey and telling a much better story. Maybe that's where the problem is. So I think you need to look at based upon where you are today, figure out what knobs need to be turned to get to this.
Hmm. No, that's great advice. What are, any books or resources you recommend? Any books you read which helped you shape your thinking about data products?
As I said, so I would say I learned it on the job, but I also
Hmm.
had the good fortune of working with some very large consulting companies where I got my own inputs too. So like for example, at GSK, we worked with, I don't think I can mention all those names, but well, some very large consulting companies.
Okay.
So I will say that there's not one single comprehensive book that you will find books about, but you
Hmm.
will find individual topics, right? For example, I think it was ThoughtWorks who published a book around data as a product, right? Or data
Yeah.
mesh architecture. So you will find different blogs and articles of that nature
Hmm.
that,
Hmm.
but they don't cohesively bring it all together, right? That's where we see an opportunity for us to help if organizations need help, right? You can also find me on LinkedIn, Kranthi Kalagara, under datalinks.us, where I published concepts of about 6 blogs or so to just kind of wet your beak in terms of how to think about it. I didn't go too
Hmm.
much technical in detail. The reason for
Hmm.
that is I see technology as a means to an end, not the starting point, and how you should think
Right.
about things differently. So that's the reason why I did what I did. There's also a boutique data player in the space that I partner with. They're called Exponential as a name of a company. Their website is exponentl.ai.
Okay.
They also have blogs that I know they're worth their salt, and they're good in the space.
Well, thank you very much, Kranti. Just for our listeners, can you tell them how can they get in touch with you to work with you?
Thank you for that, Ash. Again, Kranthi Kalagara, as my name indicates, just find me on LinkedIn. You can also send me an email at Kranthi. I'll spell it out, KRANTHI, at datalinks, it's plural, .us. So Kranthi at datalinks.us. So you can reach me through that email, and I'll be happy to work with you.
No, that is great, Kranti. Thank you.
Kranti, look, I
Prash and
mean, this
me.
has been amazing. Yeah, go ahead, Ash.
Yeah. No, I was just saying, Prash and me want to thank you for your time and joining us. And any last words, Prash?
No, this has been amazing, amazing last 30 minutes or so, Kranti. I learned a ton of stuff about data products just talking to you and working with you on this podcast. So I'm going to go and read some of those resources you talked about and also connect with you on other channels where we may not have connected. The good news is we are connected on LinkedIn for a long time now. So
Yes.
definitely connect with Kranti, folks who are listening to this. I'm super excited about this conversation. And looking forward to probably having you again at some point, Kranti, on this podcast.
I definitely hope so. And thank you for the opportunity, folks. I know this is your first podcast, but so was mine. So, hey,
It's a journey. It's a journey
it's a
we're
journey.
on. So,
Yeah, there you go. That's
yes,
the way to think
yes.
about
Ash, any last words? And I think we can wrap up. This has been a great conversation.
Yep.
Thanks for
No, it's a
everybody
great
for joining us.
conversation, guys. Thank you so much.